All right, welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of SABR in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. All right, let's get right into it tonight, shall we? Historically, Major League Baseball players' wives and girlfriends occupied rather thankless jobs centered on the emotional labor of supporting their husbands, the team, and their husbands' career goals. Specific work typically defined as gender work or the physical, behavioral, and self-presentational process of performing the expectations of gender norms became central to the expectations of a WAG. Even when celebrities married ball players, such as Marilyn Monroe or Kate Upton, they put the players' needs before their own. In recent years, WAGs have begun to use the celebrity of their husband to build a name for themselves by demonstrating on social media the emotional labor and gender work that they perform daily. This presentation explores the phenomenon of the baseball WAG and how the gender work and emotional labor has not changed. The needs of the player always come first, but the women performing these roles have. Allison Levin is a professor of sports communications and the vice president of the board of directors. Her research builds upon an eclectic background of political science, economics, women's studies, communications, and the law. In recent years, she has focused on the effects of social media on pop culture, communication, and sports, primarily baseball. Born and raised in St. Louis, Allison is an unapologetic Cardinals fan, even if her former player is Clayton Kershaw. And she is here tonight to share her SABR 52 presentation, Gender Work, the evolution of WAGs from support system to celebrity influencer. Allison Levin, welcome to Northern New England. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I hope everybody's ready to learn a little bit about WAGs and sort of my take on them. Let me get my screen going. We got it up there for everybody.
Looks good.
Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking, as Bruce said, about gender work, the evolution of WAGs from sports support system to celebrity influencer. My name is Allison Levin, and all the ways you can reach me are up on the screen now. Before we start, it's important to establish some clarifying and definitional points. First, WAGs refers to wives and girlfriends of professional athletes. For simplicity, I will use the term WAGs and wives interchangeably, and both will include wives, girlfriends, and partners of Major League Baseball players. Next, as this is social scientific research, I've looked at the community as a whole. While I might give some specific examples to make my points, I do not know any particular wife situation. So in the spirit of the research, we will look to this as a topic covering generalized average WAG. Finally, along those same lines, we know there are some WAGs who come into the relationship with a different power structure than what I will be discussing. Women such as Marilyn Monroe, Kate Upton, and more recently Vanessa Hudgens, Mallory Pugh Swanson, and Livy Dunn. While some of the themes might apply in certain cases, these women already have their own identities, as defined in this work, and are viewed as outside the scope of the project, though I'm happy to talk about their dynamic during the questioning period. The term groupie was not used until the rock music scene of the 1960s to mean all young female fans, regardless of whether they had contact with board members. Due to the threat of the sexual infidelity inherently due to the threat sexual infidelity inherently plays in the WAG-player relationship, we must though define baseball Annies, or their groupies. By the 1970s, the term had been extended to include any fan or devotee of an activity. By 1980, the term was gaining momentum in baseball. Despite the etymology of the term groupie, we know that baseball groupies, often called baseball Annies, and their subsequent affairs existed well before the 1960s. According to work by Ardell, as well as Gemlock, what we call groupies existed as early as the 1880s. For example, Babe Ruth's stomachache heard round the world that was widely reported to be from eating too many hot dogs was most likely a venereal disease. Until the 1970s and 80s, little was written or said about baseball Annies. Ignoring the subject was beneficial all around because such women undermined baseball's all-American image. Furthermore, sports writers, many of whom enjoyed their own cadre of groupies, cooperated. They took the position that their job was to cover what happened on the diamond, not after hours. Things began to change with the publication of Jim Bouton's Ball 4, which went into detail about the behavior of his teammates. However, it was not until the release of Bull Durham and its baseball Annie, Annie Savoy, that the existence of baseball groupies became widely known in the general public, and players' one-night stands and long-term extramarital affairs became media fodder. Now, with all the background material clarified, it's time to jump into the heart of the presentation. In the modern era, the typical fan's perception of WAGs, which comes primarily from glimpses of them in the stands and on player and team social media, is that they are pretty, wear stylish clothes, and lead a life of privilege. The reality is much different. This lifestyle, while it might have a glamorous angle, is anything but. You're the mother, you're the father, you're everything. You're the handy person, you're the secretary, you're the receptionist, you're the agent's assistant. You're home alone with your kid and you are multitasking. All I can say is you are just working your ass off with being a supportive wife. Very challenging, very stressful, very unstable. I don't think fans understand how unstable it is. In addition to this gender work being performed daily, there's the fear of the player cheating, fear of constant movement, and a need to find a place within the hierarchy of WAGs, which in many cases act as your only support system during the season. All of these challenges lead to what we are going to define as control work the WAG must perform in the relationship. Control work comes from the power dynamic in gender-specific occupational roles where women have subordinate status and are often infantilized, motherized, sexualized, objectified, and stigmatized. Baseball WAGs represent an extraordinary composite of wives in career-dominated marriages, which require them to support and defer to their husbands. Baseball WAGs typically lead lives characterized by geographic mobility or instability and deal with their husbands' routine and extended absences from the home because of work and travel. These women typically manage 3 houses: off-season, spring training, and regular season, and coordinate the multiple moves associated therein. At least with those moves, they can plan and organize them. That is not the case if their player is part of a trade or reassignment. In those situations, the player must report immediately, and the WAG is left behind to handle closing down the current residence, finding a new home in the new city, and moving the player, themselves, and any kids and pets on their own as quickly as possible. They are expected to follow the moral codes implied in the public images of their husbands as a positive role model. To increase family time, WAGs often talk about adapting to their husband's schedule. Both Rachel Gomber and Austin Gomber of the Rockies' wife, and Sarah Waka, the wife of Michael Waka of the Royals, discuss how they completely changed their kids' schedules as soon as possible to promote a baseball-friendly lifestyle. They train their kids for bedtime to be 3 hours after night games, so they are on the same schedule as dad. This allows the kids, some of whom are as young as 6 months old, to go to the game with mom and give the player more time to project an image of being a good, engaged father. This feeling that they need to adjust their schedule and show their husbands as a perfect role model stems from the concept of gender work. WAGs are not submissive or weak, though they often experience gender and marital inequality that can lead to forms of oppression. This oppression comes from the concept of the spoiled athlete syndrome, which describes a pattern of male entitlement and genderized attitudes about power and control expressed by many male athletes. The spoiled athlete syndrome includes the player having a highly inflated sense of self, a strong idea of male privilege, and an inflated importance given to their career. These players expect star treatment, even from their partner, and believe things will be taken care of for them. These players also expect that their special status should open doors, impress others, excuse offensive behavior, and explain inappropriate activities. The male athlete has learned to define the male self and their sport in the socialized concept of hegemonic masculinity, which defines how they do gender work. The wife's gender work then becomes making home life and family life stress-free for her player, so his career becomes family-free, except for when it benefits his image. Thus, the WAG's involvement in this two-person career is to benefit the player and help him maintain gainful employment and put on public performances of marriage and fatherhood. These WAGs, who are essential collaborators in their partner's career, are not formally recognized, employed, or financially compensated for their gender work. This type of gender work is what Daniels refers to as invisible labor, and it leads to an inequality in the relationship. The WAG's gender work assists the player's identity as a professional athlete. The invisible work is a response to his occupational uncertainty and a sense of occupational powerlessness, leading the player to control what he can. In theory, that is his wife, his marriage, his family, and his home. WAGs can undermine this inequality by achieving their own power and identity outside the player's orbit, which pushes back on what the player can control. However, due to the nature of the relationship, regardless of the power dynamic, WAGs are still subject to what we will define as marital control. Marital control, as exemplified by the unequal power dynamic in the relationship, and is often exacerbated by the threat of cheating. So we must ask, why is cheating or the threat of cheating so prevalent? The culture of sports celebrity sends the message that women exist primarily as rewards for athletic achievement. Some athletes justify cheating by viewing women as objects of sexual gratification and make a sharp distinction between sex and love. This dualistic perspective reflects male hegemony and its emphasis on family patriarchy, especially the player as protector of his partner, the good girl. We conceptualize this as the virgin prostitute syndrome. While not all players cheat, the threat is there, and that helps the player maintain marital control. For those who cheat, we can look at a justification rooted in the spoiled athlete syndrome. While some use the virgin prostitute syndrome as a justification to cheat, others use it to maintain control within the relationship. In other words, they have groupies or sexual objects on the road while their wife, who they love, is waiting at home. Those who do not cheat may negate the concept of their wife as a good girl by imagining her instead as a prostitute and treating her as if she is one of the other women available for him to cheat with. His sexual encounters with his wife may have less to do with love and more to do with sexualizing or hypersexualizing her. In response, she may believe she has to fulfill his sexual needs as part of her marital role and to keep him from cheating. The cost of this additional marital control is that WAGs live in fear of a player cheating and may look for empowerment wherever they can find it, starting with bonding with other WAGs. For new WAGs, this relationship can help them understand how to regain their individual identity, and for established WAGs, it helps them maintain their identity. With families and traditional support systems often not readily available to WAGs due to the constant movement of players and the uniqueness of their career, WAGs by necessity become each other's support systems. This system does not come without its own hierarchy. Organizational socialization theory suggests the more senior player wives will exert control, while the younger player wives will be welcomed but will have to prove themselves. Each year, due to the movement, this hierarchy resets as a team is made up of different WAGs, and they have to make new relationships and figure out where in the organizational hierarchy they will fit. WAGs understand and support each other and develop strategies to deal with the challenges they face because they are all dealing with the control issues that come with their position. This hierarchy, while reinforcing social control, also helps WAGs find their own identity. The hierarchy helps newer WAGs learn from established veterans how to survive the gender and control work they must perform and how to overcome the marital control they are subjected to. While they don't speak in the technical terms, WAGs understand the reality of what life is like and have developed ways to manage it. This understanding can help a WAG find the confidence they need to succeed in this unique system. They learn how to empower themselves through the challenges inherent in the WAG-player relationship. Through the hierarchical support system, they learn how to regain or maintain their own identity outside the player's orbit. And in today's social media world, many are using this knowledge to do more than maintain their identity. They are growing it as social media influencers. Social identity theory is the appropriate lens to utilize to explain how WAGs take the glimpses of empowerment and identity building they see and develop an identity outside of the player and his career. Instagram and TikTok are the primary platforms WAGs use to demonstrate their reclaimed identities. These social media interactions allow the WAG to demonstrate different aspects of their personality. Through the theory of filtering, they demonstrate who they are. They gain self-confidence from their knowledge that they are part of a unique social group, in this case, WAGs. Finding this group who understand what it means to be part of a unique family of women who are inherently subjected to a multitude of patriarchal controls, while the public thinks their life is perfect, empowers them. For many, the feeling of empowerment is enough. However, for a small subsection, they realize there is an audience willing to support them and empower them further. They also see examples of other WAGs being successful on these platforms, and it pushes them forward. It is important to remember the reason WAGs can be successful online is that the majority of their initial followers are fans of their husband, and thus they must protect his image as part of the control work in the marriage. Thus, they use filtering, which in its most general sense means not showing unwanted material. For these women, this allows them to obtain control they do not have in other aspects of their lives. Their digital mediation not only leaves elements of their lives out, it refashions it. Through social media, WAGs can reshape what game day, road trips, and off days look like, the dynamic of moving homes, and the off-season experience. They show the positives of their lives and reshape the negative control elements they're still subject to. The videos rarely show the player, and if they do, it is a cute interaction with the kids or a game day highlight. They change their narrative through social media, which helps them feel empowered in ways that they don't feel in their ordinary life. This form of empowerment allows the women to overcome structural inequalities and obtain economic independence and successes as social media influencers. We will examine this as a classic example of neoliberal feminism. Neoliberal feminism is a particular machinery of governing women in global markets. It places the emphasis on the market and considers how women are increasingly encouraged to become entrepreneurial agents in control of their own destinies via individualized strategizing. Feminist theory suggests that social media has the potential to challenge dominant representational regimes by providing avenues for WAGs to enhance their visibility on their own terms. It allows WAGs to bypass their husbands and regain control over how they are represented and build audiences outside of baseball. They craft and control their own representations in ways that counter stereotypical images of WAGs, and in doing so, challenge the associations of control work and gender work in their relationships. WAGs make the most of their physical and gender capital as part of their personal branding strategies. With the focus on the account of a WAG, while the focus of the account of a WAG might initially appear to be at odds with the idea of strategic subject, neoliberal feminism suggests that this is central to how a WAG can form a successful brand, since it fits within social expectations that these women live an elevated and elite lifestyle. In filtering content, she is not seen as a real threat to the player's sense of economic or cultural power, and thus her social identity strategies find a place in the broader popular culture marketplace. Self-subjugation on social media and the WAG's resulting empowerment fits the definition of neoliberal feminism. WAGs are reclaiming and reshaping their relationship with the player and changing their lives by moving from completing invisible labor for the spoiled athlete to equalizing the power dynamic in the relationship. They use what they are given to find empowerment and equalize the overarching WAG player power dynamic. WAGs are no longer completely dependent on the player, and by having their own fans and groupies, They push back on the control, they push back on the control work in the relationship. WAGs are using the feminist language of women's empowerment and agency to reshape their responsible selves. They place themselves as active participants in the global economy and are finding their own solutions to wider gender injustices. With established WAGs passing the idea of being present on social media down to newer WAGs, we are seeing that space on social media growing exponentially. And here are my sources. I don't expect you to read them all, but if you're interested, they are there.
For those of us who are of a certain age, it can be very tiny print.
I had to fit them all in one slide. I didn't need multiple slides of sources. So it is small print. You can also email me and I'm happy to share my slides.
That's
I'm going to
terrific.
stop sharing though, because then we can all actually talk.
There we go. So if you have a question for our presenter, Allison Levin, tonight, go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the react button. You will see a second button marked raise hand. Raise your hand and we will get you in line to ask questions or make comments on our presentation this evening. One of the things that has crossed my mind, it crossed my mind in Minneapolis when I sat in and listened to this presentation, and now is, and I'm not even sure it's a fair question, but I'm going to put it out there because I know you well enough where you'll understand what I'm trying to say. Is how many, or is it reasonable to think that many of these ladies who are on TikTok and whatnot, many of these WAGs, do they have professional help in crafting these online personas, do you think?
From what I understand and from having just explored thousands of WAG social media posts, generally speaking, no, they do not. When they start, they just want to share their life on social media. As they become more of an influencer, most of them hire companies that will represent them
Okay.
and provide them with more help. They're still creating their own content, but they'll have representation that'll help them get more brand deals, help them get more, advertising, all which
Clicks.
builds up their own power, builds up their own support system, and allows them to break free a little bit from their husband.
Do the ball clubs have any influence in how WAGs present themselves online?
No, not particularly. What we see is that the WAGs feel very strongly that they need to maintain a certain ideal or a certain image because they still need to protect their husband
Mhm.
and their husband's image, and that's part of what goes into this. So I would anticipate that just like other problems that happen in relationships or things that go on behind the scenes, teams would get involved or not want to sign a player if their wife was causing all kinds of problems or disruptions. But most of them understand what the parameters they're working in. Some teams actually appreciate very active WAGs because it brings
Oh,
in a new fan base. If you look at some of these accounts, they have quite a few followers. They're over 1 million followers, 2 million followers, and their starting base was the fans of the husband.
hmm.
But it's grown out of that, and so now you've got people who are, I can think of one, her name is Natalie. Her boyfriend is Bobby Miller of the Dodgers, and she's got now her own podcast dealing with martial arts. She's got her own uh UFC like watch party she does on her account. And she's out there at Dodgers spring training right now taking pictures with fans.
Hmm.
They know who she is. They're going up to her, they're approaching her. And so I've got to imagine the teams appreciate that because there's a new level of fandom that's coming into play.
Interesting. Interesting. Thank you for that. Let's go to Molly. Molly, you're up. Go.
So, Allison, I have a question that's basically the complete opposite of my husband, because of my personal experience.
Not
Um,
surprised.
um, as you know, Bruce is very active on social media, but I have no presence on social media at all due to some personal experience in my life. And I was wondering, are there any WAGs that stay off social media?
There are quite a few. This is one of these things where It's a newer trend, and it's something that
Uh-oh, did she freeze?
they
It
have to
appeared.
deal with quite a bit to be getting. Sorry, they're getting the pushback when their husband has. Did I go out?
You froze
Am I
for just a
okay?
Yeah,
second.
you froze for a second or two.
Sorry, I got a little note on my screen, but they get the pushback when their husband has a bad outing, or their husband doesn't have, a good game, or they get pushback about what they're doing with the kids. Are they raising the kids properly? So it's actually very tough, especially initially, for these women to be on social media and be as active as they are. So you see, like, the Dodgers actually have their own WAG account. You can look it up. It's like LA Dodgers WAGs, and they repost all of the posts of the Dodgers wives. And if you look through it, it's, maybe 15 wives in total who have any sort of social media presence. So it's a new thing, it's a growing thing, but it's something that no, not every wife participates in.
Thank you again for coming.
No problem.
Karen Holleran, you're up. Go. Karen, how you doing?
Hey, I have a question. That was a good question, Molly. I want to know, has it been a problem for the WAGs with 24-hour news and TMZ and paparazzi?
Not as much as you would think. Primarily because they're mostly still centered in the baseball world.
Okay,
You're getting a little bit of that pushback, as I mentioned, if their player doesn't have a good game. You see a lot of it involving the kids. I mentioned in the talk how a lot of them adjust the kids' schedule so that
yeah.
they are up at the end of baseball games, stuff like that. And you'll see a lot of comments on their posts, about after the game. Rachel Gomber does this a lot. She shows her kids at Rocky Stadium after the games, with her husband, and you'll see a lot of comments on there, people sort of saying, well, you're a horrible parent. How dare you have your kids up at 11 o'clock at night? They're only 2 years
Oh,
old.
come
Like, that's
on.
not
Really?
appropriate.
Everybody
And
has an
so,
opinion.
and you see, if you see like a kid running around by a pool, that you'll hear there'll be a ton of parenting comments come in. So you almost get it more from the fans than you do from outside. If
Okay.
you're in the LA market or the New York market, like Aaron Judge's wife is no longer on social media, in part because of how the New York media reacts to Aaron Judge and then was reacting to her. So you see some of that, but not in most areas of the country.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, great question.
Troy, you're up.
Um, I'm just kind of curious. You seem to have a relatively positive view of how social media has influenced WAGs. I was wondering if there's, because I was wondering if there is a particular type of this content that is already, because to me it seems like these, even for the influencers, their image is still kind of based on their role as WAGs. Has there been like any breakout from that very specific uh kind of still shackled to the image of being married to a famous guy? Or
I would say that the scope of what I looked at really was those wives who were married, you know, they were WAGs first, and then they decided that they wanted to become, then they broke out into social media. So they're always sort of tied down to this idea that they are the wife or girlfriend of a professional baseball player. There are some that you see that really don't mention it anymore, and I think that's their attempt to break free of it, like Chelsea Freeman, Freddie Freeman's wife, rarely posts anything about baseball. Even in the postseason, as he was hitting his grand slam and everything, she posted very little about the postseason. She didn't do a lot of shots in the stands, celebrating with other WAGs. She didn't show off like game day fits, which is very common amongst most of the WAGs. So, and her account is made up a lot of her endorsing products and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So that's sort of, I think, her trying to break away a little bit from Freddie and sort of showing herself in her own light. What you're talking about, the type of player, wife that you're sort of talking about, are the ones that have their own identity before they get married or get involved. So those are the ones I sort of talked about at the beginning, like your Livy Dunns, your Mallory Pugh Swansons, Kate Upton, where they have their own identity, they have their own strength that they're bringing into the relationship. So then it's almost their choice how much they want to, play up the I'm a wag, or how much they want to play up I'm a gold medalist, in the Olympics, or I'm a, top college gymnast. It's sort of their choice what they want to cover. But for the people that I was talking about, most of them did start off as wives or girlfriends first, and so they're sort of locked into that as part of their personality. But by doing this, it allows them to have more freedom and have the ability to get some control back in their lives.
Victoria, you're next. How are you this evening?
I'm good. So I'm mostly interested in statistics related research and like data analytics. Are you aware of like anything? I tried to scan through the list of citations you had, but are you aware of any research? Because people love like, oh, did the player go out last night? Did they get married in the off season? Analyzing that sort of things. And I'm kind of afraid to ask because it's like, once you can kind of quantify like a player's relationship, milestones going well, then you can also quantify, things that the fan base can get after these women for.
Yeah.
Did you see anything, I guess, related to that?
I will say I am very analytical, so I'm right with you in your question. I actually have a note in my future research to look at baseball wedding season, because they all get married about the same month or so. Like if you follow the WAGs accounts in December, they're all going to the same weddings because that's when they all get married.
My favorite team is the Diamondbacks, and they like 6 players I think got married this offseason.
Yeah, and it's always the same time, and you see all the WAGs on each other's accounts, and it's when you figure out who's friends with who. It's a very exciting time for those of us who follow those accounts. But in terms of quantifying it, I don't think there's any research that specifically quantifies it. I mean, you could pick, 10 players and sort of track their statistics from when they got married to later. I don't know what you'd get out of it. I don't know that you see any real trend. I think where you see it, and somebody mentioned in the comments, I think I saw about trolls. That's where you really get it, is the wives. Like if you sort of come out as a new couple, or it's, you get hard launched, as they say, or, you get married or something and the player comes in and doesn't have a great start to the season, or you have a baby and the player doesn't have a good start to the season. It's usually the player is going to take it. I mean, the player is going to take it in the media, the player is going to take it from fans, but that wife is also going to take it a lot. And so I think that second part of your question about like fans could use it against the wife or girlfriend, that's already happening. That's happening without the statistics. That's, the ability to feel like you can comment on anybody's post about anything you want to talk about.
Was it Ted Williams years ago who coined the term Knights of the Keyboard? I think that
Yep.
it applies here. It was Ben Abel who made the comment about trolling earlier. What was that? Did someone make
keyboard warriors?
Keyboard Warriors? That's it. That's right. Yep, Keyboard Warriors. Ben Abel made the comment, trolling must be epic in these situations.
Oh, yeah.
I can
I
only
can see
admit,
it. You can
what's
see
that?
it on Twitter. You can see it on Twitter and X even before X became X.
Mhm.
Like, I was like reading some of the stuff and I'm just like, you're an asshole, dude. Like you got no place.
Yeah, and it's
bad.
It's really bad on Instagram and TikTok, because I think people, because especially with TikTok and it's so hard to see the stories again, people just feel like they can say whatever. You read accounts of those management companies once they get popular enough, literally having a single person whose job it is to block people.
That
into the worst of if into
wait a
social
minute.
media you go, only the worst of, but you have to say it in a Yoda voice. only the worst of humanity. Like you have to say,
Bro's got a great comment. Yeah, if into social media you go, only the worst of humanity you shall find. I
Yes.
was, no truer words. I mean, really, I'm flustered from 2 sentences ago. Companies employ people to simply block these people? Really?
Well, if you become big enough and you have a management company working with you, yeah, part of their job is to block people who are being offensive in the comments. Because that's a full-time job for people who are on social media at an influencer level. And so that's part of what you're paying for if you have a management company is, yeah, I mean, Tony said, or Troy, sorry, said it's basically moderation, and that's
Mhm.
what it is.
Mm-hmm. That's I we are emboldened by these screens in front of us in a lot of cases to say a lot that I don't think we would normally say.
Mhm.
And that is not to say that anybody here on this call is to blame for that. It's a general statement. And I
Well,
can see where many of these women would be completely taken aback, for lack of better, I don't even know how to say it, by the keyboard warriors, the knights of the keyboard that go after them for their husband's error in the 5th inning of the 3rd game of the season that cost their favorite team an innocuous Wednesday night cold drizzly game in front of 5,000 people. Yeah.
some of what you have to remember though is, especially with the wags, is sometimes the comments are from people who are generally well-meaning. They just, in the context, it's inappropriate. So like what I said about like the children, like, people have, I mean, it's with anybody, they have opinions about how you're raising your kids. And where you wouldn't normally share that, they feel emboldened because they care about this wife or they care about the player and they have this parasocial relationship. So they want you to know that they don't think your kid's in the car seat correctly. That's something that, the parent is going to obviously be in charge of, but it comes off inappropriate on social media, and it would come off inappropriate in person unless you were like, an extremely close friend, but they feel like they're doing something good. And that's a lot of these comments is they feel like, oh, you shouldn't be feeding your child that's so bad for them. Or have you heard about this? Are you, I can't believe you're representing this company has chemicals in it, and so like you get a lot of that sort of well meaning but inappropriate comments that happen a lot.
Been able to go.
You should go to Sportsnet. I don't know if you can share it. Go to the Sportsnet account, especially after the Blue Jays kerfuffle with Vlad Guerrero Jr. and his contract. I'm sure everybody knows what's going on there. About how the Blue Jays and Vlad Guerrero Jr. did not come to an agreement on a contract extension. Go read the comments on the Sportsnet tweet. Not necessarily trolling Vlad, but boy, oh boy, people on that Twitter feed sure don't like Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro. It is absolutely vicious on there. So there's an example. I know it's not Wags, but seriously, right?
Yeah.
Keyboard warriors.
Yeah, they are. Oh man, if Vlad leaves Toronto,
Karen Holleran, you're up.
Oh, okay. I used to teach online. And I found that the students, if they can't see you, you're the worst of the worst. Until they get to see you face to face. All of a sudden, they have this different change.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if that's part of what happens with how are you treating your kids or how are you dressing them or.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes in that. I think it's that parasocial relationship where it's sort of that one-sided relationship and you feel like you know the person, you can talk to the person, you can share all that with the person, and it's nothing there. But then if you actually meet them in person and it becomes two-sided, then that changes the entire dynamic of that potential relationship.
Yes.
I read an article a while back. I don't remember which player it is. I wish I did, but it said that whenever he got troll comments on his Twitter or whatever, he would just write back, like God bless you, or I appreciate you. He'd write back something incredibly positive, and they would just those trolls would almost always come back and be like, "Oh my God, I love you. This is so great. Thank you so much." And so it wasn't really about being a troll as much as just getting the player's attention. And I think that happens a lot with the WAGs as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I've heard this comment from different people on social media, and sometimes you'll see even better known influencers saying this. Not the danger, but the challenges of having kind of parasocial relationships where you have this sort of quasi intimate window into their lives, and they'll tell you, well, I went to my favorite coffee shop today, and then I went on a date with my boyfriend, and then I saw this movie. And there's a sense that sometimes the audience can read a little bit more and take a little bit more from those parasocial relationships than they should. But with a WAG influencer, because they're married, do you feel like that places any kind of damper on the parasocial nature of some of these relationships?
I don't necessarily think so, in part because their initial fan base typically is fans of the player.
Yeah.
So you get that. I think it's that 1 degree of separation.
Mm-hmm.
So if the player's not going to be active on social media, and honestly, most players are not active, and the players that appear to be active have somebody else running their accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the players aren't that active, but I'm trying to think of a good one to use. I mean, if you really like Josh Smith of the Rangers, and he's not on social media, but his wife Carolyn is, and she posts constantly. I mean, she'll run up 12, 14 stories on Instagram a day.
Yeah.
You can feel like you know who Josh is because she's posting.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see what their house looks like, you see what their dog looks like, you see what the inside of their cars look like, you see what weddings they go to, what parties they go to. So I think it actually maybe expands the parasocial relationship a little bit between the fan and the player.
Okay.
In the sense of, like, I can't see into that part of the player, but the wife is going to show me all of it.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks.
No problem.
That is a sweet Orioles jersey you got on too, Adam.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So yeah, it's a couple iterations back.
It's all right. It's all right. Last one tonight is going to be Ben. Go.
Have you ever had the Bryce Harper video when the fan is trolling Bryce Harper in Atlanta, and he's yelling at him, "You'll never be as good as Acuna." This is 2022, and so it's Ronald Acuna Jr., obviously.
Yeah.
And so the fan is yelling at Bryce, "You'll never be as good as Acuna. You'll never be as good as Acuna." And Bryce turns around and says, "Pronounce his name right. It's Acuna." It's brilliant. Because the fan's basically behind, I don't know if he's behind he must be in the outfield behind the pitchers section where the Phillies were sitting. And so he just keeps yelling at Bryce, right? "Oh yeah, you'll never be as good as Acuna. You'll never be as good as Acuna." And then Bryce turns around and actually corrects the pronunciation of Ronald Acuna Jr.'s name. It's priceless. It is. And then somebody came out with T-shirts that had the correct pronunciation of his name.
That's great. I think if you play in Philadelphia, you have to.
It is one of the
You
funniest
have to
things
be able
I've
to
ever
handle
seen.
any sort of troll if you play in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, Philadelphia, Atlanta fans trolling each other. It's like, oh,
Well, this has been really rather interesting. I appreciate you doing this for us, Allison. Thank you very much. All right, let's do this again next week. What do you say? Believe it or not, we're going to take Monday off. I know, but it's the way it's got to be. Our next event is Wednesday, February 26th, when we'll have SABR member Cassidy Lent with us to discuss her work with the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, as well as the upcoming Cooperstown Symposium on Baseball and American Culture. The link to sign up is in the meeting booklet distributed each Monday and also available on the SABR events calendar at sabr.org/events. If you're enrolled in our service that signs you up for meetings automatically, you'll receive your join the meeting email Wednesday morning. And we'd like to thank longtime and esteemed SABR member Dixie Tarango for his help in arranging Cassidy's appearance. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our weekly uploads. And if you're not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research committees, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. Allison, Levin, you are fantastic. Thank you very much for doing this for us this evening.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you so. We're going to get everybody out of here because we've got places to be too. So we'll see you next Wednesday, everybody. Have a good night.
All right, see you then.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
everybody.